Hello guys and welcome to a new episode of Sound Design Monday. Today we are going to be looking at pretty much the bass from Pallaroid, or the lead for the drop. I like to call it the bass because it kind of goes in the lower frequencies a lot and it's pretty much programmed like a bass. So the leads we're going to be making sound like this. Just kidding, we need to load them up. Alright, so we're going to load the sound up. So here we have two patches, but I like the second patch better that I made. Same for this one. Let's do the lame one. Now the reason I called them lame was because they don't really sound the same, but it's the closest I could get to the sound, and so it's gonna sound like. Okay, so that's the closest I could get to the Pallaroid bass. Obviously, you know, he might have changed a few things certain ways, but you know, I don't really want to spend like my whole day trying to just twitch some knobs randomly to see if I can get that sound. So we're going to be using Silent 1 and Massive for this. I know it's kind of weird since usually Silent 1 and Massive go against each other, but we should be getting that sound specifically, and we'll talk about a little bit about the parameters and what we did in order to achieve that sound, so you guys can learn how to make them on your own as well. As always guys, please make sure to subscribe to this YouTube account and like my Facebook page, Send World Music. Also make sure to like the podcast page for Evolution of Sound. That's a little project I have on the side, mainly to encourage you guys to finish your tracks, send them in, and get them heard. Hopefully we can make it into something big. I will not be using that podcast for promotional purposes. I'm just saying that's just me. So it'll be nice if you guys can support that that podcast to help you guys out. Anyways, let's get started. So we're gonna be starting with Massive because Massive is better than Silent 1. Don't cry. It's just honestly I feel like that's the way. Let me check something. I forgot to turn that on. Anyways, let's get started. So here we have Massive. So today we are going to be pretty much using 3 oscillators, which is kind of weird whenever you're using a bass, but since this is going to be a lead and this is kind of like a big room track, then you know you can do it. It's not going to be really that big of a deal. So we are going to be using just filter 1 as a low pass 2 and so forth. So let's get started. So for oscillator 1, we're going to be having a square and saw 1. Saw 1 is really popular when it comes to basses, just because if you get any saw from any synthesizer and you lower it an octave or 2 and then you play it, it sounds so good already, but then once you start adding effects and you get that fart bass that a lot of trance producers use nowadays. So yeah, saw is a really great wave, and here we have a square and saw wavetable position all the way to the right. Pretty much all that's happening here is if our wavetable position was all the way to the left, we would be having the square wave. And if we move it all the way to the right, we have the saw 1. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that you can turn saws into sine and into a square. It's just that in Silent 1, you can just choose the wave straight out. But the thing is, with Massive, you can get a little bit creative and get more unique sounds because you can put the wavetail position to be half saw, half square, which gives you a unique sound. Okay, so all the knobs are to the right, and we're going to be routing this to filter 1 all the way. Oscillator 2, we're going to be having a D duck organ wavetable. We're going to put that at 3, intensity at 8, and amp all the way up, -12, down an octave. So the same for oscillator 1, we're going to be down an octave. We're routing this all the way to filter 1 as well. Now in oscillator 3, we're going to be using a drive 1 filter. Wavetable. We're going to turn this all the way to the right with intensity all the way up, just a little bit before the end. Just pull it up a little bit, and amp all the way up with down an octave. We're going to put this in the middle. We don't need to route it, but you know what, just route it, fuck it. Next, we're going to be putting some white noise, color all the way up. I generally don't like using my white noise in the middle because it kind of produces really white noise that is in the mid frequencies, and it kind of muddies up your sound or your mix. So you know, just be careful with that. Next, we're going to be putting a hard clipper from Massive, and we're going to put the dry and wet at 11, and we're going to put this at 1 o'clock. Okay, now we go into our filter section where we have a low pass 2 filter, the cutoff all the way up with the resonance set to 11. If this is your first tutorial you're watching of me, then what resonance is pretty much this. You see this moving up and down, that's your resonance. So high resonance, so forth. So pretty much the point where the filter is starting to cover, it's going to ask you how much you want to release at that point. So usually these is good to kind of get more of this sound out while you're covering more of the highs. So it's a weird thing. It's like when you want to focus on a frequency more. And it's a pretty cool effect to apply to pads. It gives you some experimental stuff, which is pretty cool. So our resonance is going to be at 10 o'clock for this. And then we're going to turn this all the way. All this is the amp. The amp, you can say slider for your filter. So once we have that, we're going to go into our voicing. We're going to put one unisono. We're going to put this at mono rotate and legato thriller. And pretty much that's it. If you choose to as well, you can turn pan position on and do a full inversion or full stereo. All that's doing is giving the sound stereo. If you have it in mono, it's going to be in the center and so forth. So I've explained this before. So generally, we're not going to be doing much here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to be applying an envelope to our reverb just so we don't have the reverb always present when the sound is playing. So this is a good way to do it. We're going to have an attack of 9, a little bit above 9. Level all the way up, of course. Decay is going to be set to 9, a little bit above it as well. And the sustain is going to be set at 12. Okay, and our release is going to be set at really hard to tell, 11 or 10, whichever you want to put it at. It's not going to do much of a deal, it's just the reverb. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to be routing this to our reverb and effects one. So let's put in a reverb. We're going to route this to the cutoff here, so it should look like this. We're going to put our dry and wet at around 8 o'clock, and we're going to lift this up to 12. Next, we're going to put our size at 11, which pretty much is just the size of the room. The way it works here is the more to the right you go, the bigger the reverb is going to be. Our density of the reverb is going to be all the way up. And the color, again, like color and the white noise, and pretty much what frequency the reverb is going to be at is going to be all the way up. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to go into the EQ, and we're going to be putting the low shelf a little bit down. Again, low shelf, if you guys want to see what a low shelf is, pretty much is this parameter here, and this is a low shelf. You can do all these. And then our high shelf is just the opposite of this. So if I get the 4 here, this is already a high shelf. You can see that's a high shelf. So you're going to decide what frequency your high shelf is going to be at with this knob. And I had it at 1 o'clock, and the high shelf is going to be really high at 3, so we can get some of the highs out of the bass so it doesn't sound so muddy. And then once we have that, pretty much almost done. Pretty much want the rate all the way up for your vibrato. And you want the depth all the way back, and then you're going to have this macro that you can just turn. I think it should be like that by default. If it's not, just make it look like this. Turn all the way, and then just you can do this, and so all sorts of things. Okay, so once we have that, let's just make sure we got everything done. We're going to go in. The last thing we're going to do is envelope 4. We're going to have a little bit of an attack. We're going to set it to 8. Hopefully it's like that by default. Decay at 12, sustain all the way up, and release at 9 o'clock. This is our release here. Release gives the sound a tail. So once we're done with this sound, it should sound like this. Now we're going to be creating the low end of the sound, which is going to sound like this. Okay, so here we have the silent patch. We're going to be oscillator A1. We're going to be using a saw wave with 2 voices, and the retrig is on. Remember, whenever you make a bass, it's always good to have the retrig on because it makes it sound more in your face. When you turn the retrig off, what happens is, you know, the phase doesn't restart over, so your saw waves is sometimes going to sound a little weak. And this is good when it comes to super saws and all that, but when it's like bass and stuff you want in your face, usually the retrig is the way to go. Is leaving it on. So we're going to have the phase down, detune down, no octaves, and we're going to put the stereo up with the pan in the center, so we're really not doing much here. We're going to leave the amp envelope A there by default, and pretty much we're not going to touch oscillator A2. We're going to be putting a band pass. The reason we didn't put anything oscillator A2 is because our filter A is going to be affecting both these oscillators, and we just want to get the we just want to get the saw wave with the band pass. And generally what a band pass is if you go to the left, the lows are going to be let out while the highs are covered. But if you go to the right, the lows are going to be covered, and you're going to get more of the highs. And it's a little weird to explain, but pretty much the reason you use a band pass is when you want to get a certain frequency from the sound, but you don't want the highs of it and so forth. So it's a good way to kind of strip a wave of some of its low and high end and just get that one specific thing. And you can create a lot of good sounds. I know Tommy Trash uses a band pass a lot when it comes to his sounds, and that's how he gets those crazy basses and so forth. So our bandpass is going to be cut off at 12, resonance all the way down, in the drive at 9, which is going to increase volume. We're going to have this at a 1224 dB type filter. Our filter control is going to be set to a little bit before 5 here that you see straight up is 12, like between 11 and 12 at 78.86 hertz. Our resonance is going to be super high, 5.52, and we're going to have a little bit of key track at 0.52. Now what key track does is, if you had this filter, let's say you have a low pass and you have it all, the cutoff all the way down, and you put the key track all the way up, what's going to happen is it's going to open up the filter, and that's just there to kind of like have a sense of, okay, like you're going to click it and then the filter is going to come back into effect. So the key track is just another way of putting a cutoff AB and putting the knob all the way to the right. Okay, so once we have this here, we're going to go into part B, where we're going to have some white noise with one voice retrig on. The volume is going to be set to 0.33. The reason for that is because you can hear higher frequencies at lower volumes better than the lower ones. So, you know, usually, as you may know, you usually need to have your kick the highest because it's in the lower frequencies, and then your sub and so forth. So that's the reason we have the white noise low. Again, amp envelope V, just leave it the same. Oscillator B2, we're going to have a saw with 8 voices, and the retrig is on. We're going to put a little bit of phase, so we're going to turn that by 13.71 degrees with the volume set to 12. The reason we're setting the volume here down is because we have 8 voices with the saw, and we're just compensating because the more voices you add, the louder the sound gets. So pretty much voices is just going to say how many waves are coming for every note you play. So if I were to play one note on the keyboard right now, let me set this up. 11 voices are coming out, but if I were to put this up to 4. Okay, so yeah, 11 voices max. So here we have 8, 1, 2, 3 plus 8 is 11. So if I were to put all of these 8, then the max voices I would be able to play when I clicked one note would probably be 32. 8 times 4 is 32. Okay, so we're almost done. We're going to go into the distortion knob, and we're going to be using a foldback type of distortion with the amount set to 2.76 and the dry and wet all the way up. Pretty much what foldback sounds good with is usually saws, because the distortion is just complementary to the saw. And if you guys don't know what distortion is, it's pretty much just a way of altering the wave or lowering like the bit rate. And usually distortion is kind of, people see it as a way of reducing the bit rate, like going from a PS3, which is God knows what, let's just say 320k bit rate or something, to an N64, which is 64 bit rate music. Or better yet, this is the best analogy, is N64 being compared, the music in N64 and sounds being compared to the Atari, which is God knows 8-bit or something. And then we're going to be having a reverb here at 55.24%. The size is 3.36. Again, you guys know what the size does. Pre-delay set to 0. Dampness of the reverb 0.00. You generally don't put dampness on just because it kind of muddies up your reverb a bit. But if you choose to add it, and usually it's good to add it in sounds that are just going to be played in the breakdown, then it's there. Compression, as always, comp ratio 100 to 1. All that says is for anything that goes over the threshold, the value of that is going to be set. Let's say 100 goes over the threshold, then it's going to be ratioed to back to a value of 1. We're going to have the attack at 1.53 and the comp release at 150.70. Okay, so once we have that, we're almost done. All we're going to do is put mix B higher than mix A. Mix A is going to be at 4.20, mix B at 7.07, and we're going to lower the master a bit to 3.05, and you should be getting the sound. Alright, so make sure to put the main volume a little bit more up so you can get most of it. Just remember, whenever you're working on sounds with Silent One, you don't want it to clip. Same thing with Massive. And you kind of just want to give yourself a little headroom, because then what's going to happen is you're going to have this clipping. You're going to go into an EQ, up some of the things, or remove some, but then you're going to have to up to compensate, and then you're going to be clipping in the EQ as well. And then if you're clipping in the EQ, you might put a compressor, and you're already clipping on the compressor, so that's not good. Anyways, guys, this has been a sound design episode with the bass from Pallaroid. This was my best recreation of it. It took me a while, but it's here for those of you who requested it, and I'll see you guys next time.